Hey everybody, Omni Griffin here, and welcome back to Receiver 2. I was originally going to play a little bit while talking, but it sort of ended up just everything basically got muddled by the fact that I was trying to play and also talk. And as the title of this episode has presumably already told you, this is the last episode of Receiver 2, at least for now. I'll get into exactly what I mean by that a little bit later, but I wanted to go ahead and do what I said I was going to do last time when I was pretty tilted, and talk about the game this episode instead of playing it and then claiming it at the end, because usually giving my brief review at the end, and that's mostly just because that usually works really well when I've beaten a game and we're done. And obviously Receiver 2, I have not beaten it. At least I don't think I've beaten it. I suppose there might be nothing beyond 5 out of 5, in which case you're just playing to play, in which case I may have beaten it. But I guess that's part of potential criticism. So the main criticism of the game, as it stands, is going to be the format by which the game runs. So when you first pick up Receiver 2, so assuming that you haven't played the initial Receiver, when you first pick up Receiver 2, you're going to be bad at the game. Now, granted, that may change. It may change because of the compound. The compound does give you the ability to hone some of your skills without playing the game, which is a pretty big difference from Receiver 1, and quite honestly, a big difference from release Receiver 2. So if you were to pick it up now and have not played any of it ever, you might get a good benefit from the compound. And overall, I do like the compound as an addition, but to focus more on the format as I'm talking about it now, the original format before the compound came out, and I mean it's still pretty much the basis of it now, is that you play a game. If you win, you go up a rank. If you lose, you go down a rank. And it's just kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting because the game has this sort of difference in skill and random that, in my opinion, could be better balanced. And the reason why I mention this is because in a game where it's all skill, like so if, as I play now and as I tried to record the episode with me playing, I basically just pushed through the first 2 levels and went from rank 1 to rank 3 in about half an hour, which isn't bad, but it's time annoyingly spent because I was starting back at 1. But you don't, because this is not a roguelite, this is a roguelike. You start from scratch, from the same point, no matter how many times you play this game. The only thing that improves is your skill, and the only thing that changes is the layout of the level. So you don't like get better level layouts or get better guns. I suppose you might unlock more guns. I don't actually know how that system works. I wasn't paying enough attention, because the guns that you can play with are not the ones that you have unlocked back at the base. So you hit this point where your skill has to go up or you're not going to go forward. But in the long run, that doesn't feel like a good system. And the reason for that is they have things in the game that remove things from skill, or in some cases add extra risks that are a little silly. So obviously the way that I died, I think it was the first time in the first run of last episode, was I tried to make a jump for a disc and missed and died. Well, I had all 4 tapes, which was super annoying, because I was like, yeah, I'll just hedge my bets, and I'll, like, when I'm about to win, I'll jump for the... I jumped way too early and I missed. I have some complaints about the controls for that sort of thing. That will come a little bit later. But overall, like that, I died and then I had to start over, which isn't necessarily as bad if I was playing this game on a stream, which I might do. I guess I'm spoiling that a little early, but I might play this game on stream at some point. And so those sort of things are less punishing. But when I've got this short format episode that I'm releasing once a week, it feels bad to lose and go back, because it's going to be a while before I play again. And even if I did it quickly and got to play another run, the best I can do is hope to end my current run where I started for the entire episode. And that's annoying. Like, that's frustrating. And when you're building skill, that loop is informative. You are getting better. And that's not to say that I can't get better at Receiver 2. I am not, the best Receiver 2 player in the world or anything like that. I mean, I suppose it's possible. I just find it very unlikely. But as my skill slowly improves, it is the other part of the game that becomes more noticeable, and that's the random, right? So when you're still like bad at the controls, when you're still not good at making quick decisions, aiming fast, which some of that I'm definitely still not that great at. But as you're improving those skills, suddenly the easy levels become a breeze. You still have to walk, you can still make mistakes, obviously, and you can still get caught. But on average, they're easier, and it's mostly because of enemy density. Whereas as you get into the higher levels, you have to go further, you have to go farther, and you also, and I said further and farther, one of them's right, one of them's wrong. You have to get more done, basically, in a level. Even though the number of tapes required is less, is fewer. These are all the grammatical things that I suck at. The number of tapes that you need is fewer. So you think that you don't have to do as much, but the enemy density is significantly higher, and the convolution of the levels kind of feels like it's also a little bit higher. You run into more dead ends. You have to, you have a more contained bit. And I don't know exactly how the algorithm that puts receivers levels together works. I just don't. It's kind of impossible to study without digging into the code. I could maybe do that, but I'm not all that interested in doing so. So I don't know if it's a contained level that's generated and all the tapes are put in it, or if it is procedurally generated on the fly as you go and just exists continuously. I'm more inclined to believe it is the first one. And I'm also inclined to believe that there's more than just 4 tapes throughout the entire level. And it's probably bigger than it needs to be. But it means that because of the enemy density, you end up with some situations that are potentially impossible or incredibly difficult to clear with a gun. And then depending on how lucky you are with ammo distribution, how much ammo you're being given either by random drops, which are there's definitely less of those, fewer, I don't know anymore. In the further difficulties, you're less likely to just find ammo just lying around. So you hit this point where you might have to try and clear a room with no ammo or with very few bullets. And sometimes the gun just fires not where you're aiming, and things like that can happen in the game that are random, but severely punish you on higher level difficulties. Like, if the first shot you take with a gun, if it's off, there's nothing you can do about it. You will always lose 1 ammo to a gun that doesn't shoot in the right place. Always. But the game also, the longer you hold up the sights, the more you shake. Like, there are things in the game that make it harder to hit your shots, especially when it's long distance. So they also talk about, trying to get through areas without, doing other things, or spending time to empty a turret of ammo. Things like that. Like, those possibilities do exist, but they're either A, tedious, or B, not always possible. Like, there are times where you just can't sneak past it. The way that it's set up, you just can't do it. Against turrets, you might be able to run through their vision. We've survived some of those sometimes if you just keep running. It's definitely less likely to do with drones, and obviously drones are more prevalent in higher levels. And drones also don't give you bullets back. Like, the difficulty exists, and the increase in difficulty isn't necessarily bad, But because every single time you lose, you fall down a rank and have to grind through something else, it makes your chance of getting through a higher level without somewhere in there being screwed by the RNG a little bit less likely. So it kind of we kind of hit this issue where even if you're good, you're gated by luck, and because the game punishes you by moving you back down a rank, all it's doing is giving the luck more chances to screw you. Which is why I think there should be something that sort of catches you as you go up. And this is purely a suggestion. I literally thought of it on the fly as I was recording the previous version of this that I'm not using. And it was basically, what if every single time you clear a level, the number of tapes it takes to get to that level goes down by 1. And maybe in higher levels, it's not like fully 1. But like rank 1, you need 5 tapes. You clear it once, you're on level 2, you die going for rank 2, or, trying to go from rank 2 to rank 3, you drop down to rank 1. Now it takes 4 tapes. And eventually you get down to 0 tapes, at which point you don't ever fall back down to that rank. And maybe this only affects like the first 3 ranks. That way, if you've played it through enough, you hit rank 4 and it's done, right? Like you have to go from 4 to 5, and if there's something past 5, I guess if there's something past 5, maybe it makes sense that 4 is where you stop. If there's nothing past 5, maybe it makes sense that 3 is where you stop. But something along those lines, right? And you can tweak it, like, if you go from level 2 to level 3, it also, counts as a clear for level 1. That way you don't hit some weird thing where because you're bouncing back and forth between 2 and 3, you basically clear out 1 on accident by getting yourself stuck at 2. I don't know. Maybe there's a system where it's really not, the number of tapes goes down every time. Maybe it's 1 every 5. Right, but the previous thing still holds. So if you're bouncing back and forth between 3 and 4, you're reducing the number of tapes and your chances of being reduced all the way back down to 1. Just a potential idea. Is it technically against the roguelike nature of the game? Yes, but also this isn't a pure roguelike anyway, because you've got tiers that you go through. A true roguelike starts the same every time, which is not true here. So we're not trying, I'm not trying to be like a roguelike purist or anything, mostly because the term is so watered down it can mean whatever you want it to mean. But roguelikes tend to not have external progress that affects your run every single time you start. Unlike roguelites, which tend to. So things like Rogue Legacy, Roguelite. You can make arguments about like Isaac and Gungeon as you unlock more things, whether or not they're roguelites, but they're closer to roguelikes because you always start fresh, basically. Which also I guess is kind of not true of Gungeon, because you slowly just officially or normally get the bullet that kills the past. Anyway, not important. Bit of a yawn there. Anyway, the thing that I'm trying to get at is, because of the randomness in the late game, it feels like the punishment that goes on there is not proportional to your skill. Not as closely proportional to your skill as the lower levels, and it just leads to a bunch of extra wasted time that you don't want to have to spend. Opinion, me. Now, that said, that is probably the biggest problem I have with this game. The second biggest problem is that the movement controls kind of suck. I mean, it's standard WASD, and like that stuff I can't really fault. The crouching is fine. I guess I could add a little addendum to shooting glass when you're close, but not close enough to get hit by falling shards, and still getting hit by falling shards kind of sucks. Not being able to figure out how far you can fall without dying also kind of sucks. I still don't have a good gauge on it because, once again, it's incredibly punishing to die. Incredibly punishing to die. So it's not something I generally tend to risk. The running controls, obviously the thing that got me killed last episode. and honestly have almost gotten me killed in a bunch of times because you know, if you tapping W to run is an interesting idea. I like it. I appreciate that they added a toggle in, which I think is like you can turn it on. I don't have it turned on, I think, in my runs. But the fact that turning that on doesn't turn off the tapping W means that like those times where like it adds to like the urgency when you're trying to run, and I think that's great. The problem is when you're trying to make micro adjustments on like a ledge to try and get like the right angle, like that has killed me at least once. Where like I'll hit W twice pretty rapidly and then you take that running step forward immediately, which to be fair is like a double-edged sword of like, okay, if you want to start running, you want to start running immediately. You tapped it twice really fast, like, okay. Like give me, instead of like a toggle run, give me like a hold to walk button. I think I discovered that if you have your gun out and pointed, you don't run. Like you can't run, but at the same time, like a lot of the times, like if you're holding your gun for an extended length of time, it definitely seems to wiggle more and to like shake. So you don't want to be holding it out consistently. Like I think there's a hidden stamina bar, honestly. I have no idea if I'm right on that. So like that's the other flaw I have, because like if you had better motion controls and movement controls, like the risky go get this disc that's hanging out on a metal beam like would be a lot less risky, and I understand that they want risk to be involved in that, but they've built such a punishing system that risking it doesn't seem worth it, like ever. And also like a lot of the situations it's like, yeah, I would holster my gun and then I would very carefully climb out there instead of like taking a running jump at stuff. Like the times that I tried to like get around a tiny thin pole, like whether it's a beam structure or something on the wall, like in real life, you holster a gun, you can hold on. You don't have to do this like, I jump, but I control myself in midair, which isn't possible in real life, and then land back on the other side, which failed every single time I've tried it. Like, I understand it's a video game, and they can only program so much, right? Like that's a lot of extra effort and extra animation. But you hit this problem where you're trying to ask too much of your own game engine, and that's when you gotta be a little bit careful. The rest of the game, I very much enjoy. I mean, I liked the original, obviously. I bought the sequel the second I realized it was coming out. It has the exact same feel as the original. I feel like there's a lot more emphasis in the tapes on gun safety and like history by doing a sequel, because the first one was like a game challenge, like make a game in a weekend sort of thing. That turned out really well, and so but they used the sequel to flesh it out. So they've got more lore, which means they've got more tapes. The number of there's so many more tapes. So many more tapes. You still hear a bunch of them on repeat, but there's so many more tapes than the original game. And it means that it's given them the ability to flesh out the world. The discs that they added let them flesh out like new characters. We got to have a whole episode where we cracked the cipher, which was pretty cool. Like those things are neat. Sorry, another big yawn because it's late. Because I decided to re-record this late because I didn't like it when I was editing it. So yeah, the additions there are great, and I think they definitely have fleshed out the world. I think this whole like, you know, reality A is where we want to be, reality B is where we are now, but you, the person playing, are in reality C. Like, I like that little creepy vibe they're going for there. I don't know how much more you get into it as you hear more tapes on level 5. But it's definitely interesting. It's definitely interesting. The arrangement of guns is pretty useful, or the different guns you can get. It's like a cool difference. I will always say this. I think that the bad chamber in a revolver is a terrible thing that should not exist. It almost instantly makes revolvers the worst gun. I actually do have another criticism, but we'll get back to it. But yeah, like the different guns overall, I like that they have that. I like that in the compound. I think the compound is a great addition. Once again, I don't know exactly when it would unlock for a normal playthrough. I don't know if you have it from the start or if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to train your skills. All the different target shooting it's cool. It's not quite my shtick. I liked it for the warm-up, but like I don't really have a desire to, hit high scores. I guess I tried a little bit the one time, but like having to reload and do all this stuff just to do challenges, like the challenges that required reloading, interesting, made me think of another criticism I have. These are smaller criticisms. I think the big ones I've already been through. But yeah, like Compound, I think it was a great addition. I think they nailed it. They added some extra mystery to everything, and it worked beautifully. I think overall the game's loop is simple, and like that succinct simplicity is beneficial to it. You collect tapes, kill drones, kill guns, go. And it doesn't sound like nearly as much praise as criticism, because I'm going to go back to criticism. I guess we're going to have a praise sandwich here. But I think the problem is with the way that I'm describing it is I can't give a good scale of what that praise actually is. And I think the thing that's gonna tell you the most about it is the number on this episode, because I actually don't remember off the top of my head what that number is, but I know it is a very large number. I've been playing this game for a long time, and while the events of last week's episode, it was like 2 weeks ago for me at this point, they kind of pushed me off the edge for stopping to play, at least in this format. Overall, it worked. It worked for me. I've got new games that I want to play, so it is always hard to find a good time to cycle things in and out, especially because I like to play roguelikes that don't always have static endings. Like, it's not like you are obviously done with this, you can now stop playing it forever. Because that's not the point of roguelikes. They're designed for you to be able to play them forever, if you want to. And so, using this as a good time to cycle out is good, but obviously I've been playing this game for a lot. I do enjoy it. I think the emphasis that they've put on teaching gun safety and gun common sense is beautiful. In the episode that I'm trashing for this one, I did go a little political and talk about guns in the world at large, but I'm not actually going to get into that, mostly because I get ranty. But I think the important part is, as long as guns exist in the world, it is better for everyone who will ever possibly come in contact with them, which qualifies as pretty much everyone. There's always a chance that you will run into one somehow, at least in today's modern world. Perhaps that's changed, or it's not entirely true where you live, but there's always a likelihood that you will run into guns. As somebody who has fired quite a few guns, because I was a Boy Scout, we had archery and rifles and shotguns at our week-long, summer camps that we went to. I've fired guns. I hadn't fired a handgun until relatively recently, when a coworker offered to take our team out to a gun range, a shooting range, as a team bonding activity. And I can very confidently say that shooting guns is fun. Shooting guns is a lot of fun. I mean, they're loud, they've got kick, they're a test of skill, how well you can aim. There's a lot of other interesting things, but like overall, if I hadn't fired a gun before, and to be fair, I have not fired until, I think it was after I was playing Receiver 1 that I went to the shooting range. I hadn't fired a pistol until then. So I definitely felt very prepared for handling a weapon. Obviously, aiming is a little bit different in video games than it is in real life. There's stuff about hand placement, which is important, especially with things like revolvers, where your hand placement can save you a bunch of burns because of where the powder ejects. Things like that. You can get nipped by the slide with other pistols because they slide, as their namesake, backwards and forwards. If your hand's in the wrong spot, you might get some skin pinched. But obviously those are minimal compared to the things that they tend very much to drive home here, and that is, the gun is always loaded. It doesn't matter if you just unloaded it. The gun is loaded. Just assume it is, because that is the safest way to handle a gun. Don't ever point it towards anything that you wouldn't want to get shot, because the gun is always loaded and it could misfire, because guns are not perfect mechanisms. They malfunction. Like, this game with its tapes drills that into you, and partially because you're playing it a lot and going back and forth and hitting those tapes that remind you of those things. But even the first one kind of did that a little bit. This one more so, but like, that is a very important, like, just a very important gun common sense thing that anyone who handles a gun should know, because you can't take a bullet back. You cannot. I mean, even rubber bullets, which are designed to be non-lethal, can kill you. It doesn't take that. Like, we humans are relatively robust against a lot of things, but putting tiny holes through us with very fast traveling things, unfortunately, is not one of the things that we're particularly resilient against. Like, obviously getting shot in the head or the heart will kill you, but getting shot other places can still do it, even with modern medical technology. I mean, anything that clips an artery, you're in trouble. Stomach wounds can still kill. Anything that causes, like, internal bleeding that's complicated, like surgery, as often as it gets used in shows and TV and even minor stuff, like, it's still serious. So having that level of safety and safety mindedness built into when you handle guns, even if it's as the result of playing a video game, is beautiful, because no other video game does that. Okay, I shouldn't say no other. There's probably at least another one out there that I'm not aware of, but like, not many video games put emphasis on the safety, because most video games aren't actually about the guns. This game is about the guns. Most of the other ones, it's, you know, special space sci-fi guns are great and fine, don't get me wrong, but most of the guns that you play, most of the games that you play with guns, they're not about the gun. Like, you know, you're like, yeah, you hit R to reload, but look at what's done in Receiver and Receiver 2 about, like, all the different button combination it takes to reload. You're stepping into the shoes of a trained gun user in those games, and you're standing on the shoulders of giants, is basically what that comes down to, which is fine. That's what those games generally are not about the guns. They're just a tool for what the game is trying to accomplish, and that's why I appreciate Receiver so much, is because it's not that. It's about the gun. Like, it was incredibly unique when I first saw it. My computer went to sleep. I don't know what that did for you guys. I imagine it's still kind of right, but anyway, yeah, that's kind of why I like Receiver as much as I do. So that's the praise that I want to give, and I hope that I can, despite all the, like, the reason why I can come up with so much criticism is because there's so much praise, because so much of it is good and sticks out as good that it's easier to find the bad parts, because they're the ones that, like, just leave that sour taste in your mouth. Like, if the game was all bad, it might be hard to put my finger on what's bad, but I can give you very specific examples of what I don't like. And to go back to the criticism, unfortunately, I mentioned the guns earlier. The which gun you get very much influences the run that you're having. That's another bit of randomness that's kind of unfortunate. Getting a revolver that has a bad chamber just sucks, because you just have to deal with it. There's no replacement chambers, which, you know, makes sense. Those don't just sit around all the time. And granted, like, any of the guns that have a clip, or just a magazine, I think it's a clip. I actually don't remember. There's a difference, by the way, between a clip and a magazine. I just don't know it off the top of my head, so I'm probably using it wrong. I think I've said that in the past. But the guns that use clips or magazines, they can have, like, bad ranges of bullets. You can only put like 4 or 5 bullets in them, but generally you're given or afforded the opportunity to find a fully usable clip. That said, when it comes to clips or magazines, I think it's clips. I'm just gonna keep using clips. It's just not useful in this game. So in a game like, you know, Call of Duty or Counter-Strike, like those games, like you will probably be in situations where you unload your entire clip and then have to reload. But the way that most of those games deal with it is they just, you know, say, oh, hey, you've got 5 bullets left in this one. We're just going to assume that when you threw that out, you didn't throw out the bullets with it. And they just magically teleported into the next one. It's a little dumb. But once again, the gun is not the primary focus of the game. The game's focusing on other things. So they don't mind doing that, and most players don't mind it because it's to their advantage. In this game, you obviously can't do that. You can hot swap clips, obviously. You know, reload. But most of the time, the action doesn't really allow for it. Like, I don't think I've ever been in a situation where my goal has been to empty my clip, reload, and then continue shooting. Save for the targets where there were literally more targets than there were bullets in the clip. Like, when you know you gotta do that, that's a different thing. But during the actual gameplay, most of it is all the encounters that you have with the drones or the turrets are so short-lived because they are such lethal enemies. You have to come at them from stealth that, you know, you can take a shot, back off, reload. You know, pull out the clip, put one bullet in, put it back in, take another shot. Like, you can play it that way if you want to. The only time it gets a little bit different than that is if a drone is coming at you, and those come at you so fast that if you don't kill them with the 1 or 2 bullets maybe you have in your clip, if you've been, you know, not refilling it immediately, that you're probably already dead. So that's more just a criticism on like how much it makes it feel like you're supposed to use that system, but it just kind of doesn't matter. It's interesting. I don't think it's bad because it's how it's not truly bad. That's what I should say. It's still a criticism, but it's not truly bad because it is still realistic to how the guns work. That's like the main thing. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed my time playing Receiver 2. I'm curious to know if there is something past level 5 and I just didn't get there. I'm probably not going to Google it though, because I think I am going to come back and play this game some more. I think I am, because as I said, I enjoyed it a lot. I don't think it's going to be as a YouTube game. It might just be for me. It might just be my own personal edification. It's possible. It might be on stream, might be just on the side. I haven't decided, but what I have decided is that I would like to free up this Friday slot for another game. I've already started playing a couple games. We've got the Steam sale that's currently going on. That's probably going to get me some more. I don't quite know exactly what's going to be there, but I would like to fill it with something new. That way we can retire Receiver 2, at least for now, on this channel, and move on to something else. And if you have watched all of the Receiver 2 videos, I realize that this is incredibly boring because I've literally been talking for over half an hour about the game. If you haven't already picked it up, pick it up. Seriously. Like, I'm gonna check literally right now while this is going on. While we're on this screen. Oh, no. I'm going to check how expensive it is. Wow, the original Receiver is $1. So, like, that's worth it. Receiver 2 is 20% off, so it's 16 bucks. US, obviously. But yeah, it's worth it. I think the $16 is worth it. I mean, I paid the 20, so obviously I think the 16 is worth it. But yeah, I definitely recommend picking it up if you haven't. And if the 16 bucks is too much for you, and you haven't played the original, I still say the original is worth giving a go. It's definitely not as good, but it's a good replacement for a significantly cheaper amount of money. Of course, right as I'm about to finish, I remember the one other criticism, and that's the jamming guns. The jamming weapons. I appreciate that guns jam. It happens. It's a thing. I hate when it happens in game because it sucks, especially when it does it continuously. I understand that the whole thing, the whole story with the enemy, like constantly making the threat. There you go. The threat, like, basically manipulates probability to make it more likely that you shoot yourself if you holster your gun too fast, or, you know, if you unholster it too fast. Like, those have to deal with safety, and I like that. It forces you to be meticulous, be careful, because that's what you'd want to be with your gun. The gun jamming a little bit extra, sometimes I don't like it's just a shitty feeling, especially when you're trying to do like the time trials. The guns shouldn't jam during the time trials. That one I will put a hard foot down. They shouldn't jam in the compound, because the compound is hypothetically free of the threat if you want to put a story thing on it, a story beat on it. But mostly it's just like, what if you've got record time and on the last target a bullet jams? It doesn't matter if you can unjam it immediately. The amount of time it takes to recognize that it didn't fire and that it jammed, and to press the buttons and then to take the other shot, you will not have achieved your record speed, and that would feel absolutely terrible. It would be crushing. In game, still hate it, understand the lore, just don't make the gun jam 17 times in a row. I hate that. Having it jam once is kind of fun. If it kills you, it sucks, and I will hate it in the moment, but I'm still okay with it as a mechanic overall. Just don't make it be a giant dick. Anyway, I recommend Receiver. I recommend Receiver 2. I think it's good. I think it is great to make somebody play this game if they want to get a gun. Honestly, I think that would actually be a really good, like, you have to beat this game. No. You have to, like, listening to the tapes, listening to the common sense, understanding and learning from it, I think are great. Especially when I've seen videos of people doing the dumbest things. There's a video of somebody fucking around with a gun and putting it to his buddy's head. And be like, look at that, I could shoot you in the head. And it's just like, I don't care. I don't need to know if that gun actually has a bullet in the chamber, because your gun is always loaded. Every gun is always loaded. Every gun's safety doesn't work. Like, those things, if you assume that they are true and you behave as though they are true, you will never accidentally discharge a firearm in a way that would lead to terrible consequences. I say should because shit can always happen. But enough about me talking about guns, because obviously, if you've watched this far, you've either watched me play this way too much, or you somehow got redirected here trying to figure out whether or not you should play Receiver 2, and you've gotten your answer. The answer is yes, you should do it. I will see you all next time when we pick up a new game, but until then, keep your gears turning.